Welcome to the second webinar in this series of short webinars by Iosecure. If you're rejoining us after our first webinar, welcome back. For the past 25 years, Iosecure has been providing IT network, security, and consulting services to a broad range of public and private sector customers from their base in British Columbia, Canada. My name is Corrine Sharp, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this three-part webinar series called Ogres and Onions, Peeling Back the Layers of IT Security. Today, I'm joined by Tom Jacoby, President and Managing Partner of Iosecure, and Mike Guelpa, Practice Lead at Iosecure. And today's topic is Taming the Dragon, Why IT Security is a Team Effort. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Corrine. I'm happy to be back.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
Fabulous. So let's do a quick recap. Our goal with this series is to shine a light on some crucial elements of IT security and provide practical advice to help our audience improve their security environment. In our first webinar, which was called Back to Basics, a New Way of Understanding IT Security, we started peeling back the layers of security onions by talking about the mindset that Iosecure wants people to have going into a conversation about their security environment. Tom, what were the key takeaway messages that matter most to you from that session, and how does that lead us to today?
Our goal in our first webinar was to encourage people, and by that we mean anyone who should be interested in IT security in their organization, to approach the security conversation by thinking about how security relates to their business goals. Whether you're the owner of a small firm or the Chief Information Security Officer in a large enterprise, IT security is all about protecting the data and information that matters to the business. This is a crucial conversation to have before making decisions about what tactics, tools, or software to buy. We spoke about some simple steps to help organizations improve their security hygiene. But today, we'll talk more about the specific roles we recommend every organization embrace to make security an easier habit to build.
Thanks, Tom. I heard some very careful language there about roles as opposed to people. Mike, why is that important?
Well, yeah, it's a good point. There's a tendency in IT security to want someone you can point at and say it's their job. And the fact is that many small companies don't have a dedicated IT group or person, but security is still important. And even in big corporate environments, the responsibility for security needs to be shared broadly in order for them to be effective. That's why we talk about roles instead.
Exactly. It's like building a team. We identify the required roles and we assign people to those roles. Some people might wear many hats. In some cases, these roles can all be fulfilled by people in-house. In other cases, we might need support from a trusted external advisor with security expertise.
Excellent. So if security isn't the job of one person or department, where does accountability start and stop?
It's a great question. As we've discussed, we strongly believe effective security is linked to business goals, and everyone is accountable. No IT person or department can define those on their own. The direction needs to be set by senior management.
So it's a leadership issue?
Absolutely. Leaders should be able to explain the what and the why of security. They can help people make the link between the processes they need to follow and how it supports the company's success. They can also lead by example, which is the best way to encourage people to form good security habits.
Yeah, it comes back to what Tom and Derek described in our first webinar about understanding the data, identifying the critical data of an organization, then helping people understand the consequences of the data or information being compromised. Within the industry, there are some great examples of leaders who do this well, but in different ways. Jamie Dimon is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, a financial institution moving trillions of dollars in transactions for their clients every day, and he speaks eloquently about why security matters so much to him and the organization, down to a very granular level, which comes from his long career in the financial sector and his deep understanding of risks. This inspires enormous confidence. And then there's Chuck Robbins, the CEO at Cisco, who began his career as an application developer and easily inspires his whole organization to walk the talk on security.
Those are great examples. So with the right tone from the top, what happens next? Who else needs to be on this team, and what do they need to do?
Our framework for security hygiene has a few components and activities. They fall into three main categories to sound fancier than they really are. The first is governance, which is about assigning roles and responsibilities. Who is responsible for setting priorities and implementing security protocols? Even a sole proprietor or a small company needs to decide whether to embrace these responsibilities themselves or to seek outside help, but it's important not to ignore them. In larger organizations, it can be easy to argue about whose portfolio something lands in while important things get missed. If we write it down, it's easier to maintain accountability. Number two is about policies, which is the bridge work of matching our business goals with the right security priorities. Every organization needs to know what security problems they're trying to solve. As you might guess, this ties directly back to knowing what data matters most to the business. This is part business leadership and part technical leadership. In larger organizations, this can include multiple management teams and even HR support. The third is about data inventory. This is unfortunately about as mundane as it sounds, but we need to know what data we have and where it is in order to make good decisions about whether and how to protect it. Not every piece of data has the same level of importance, so classifying our data can help guide the decision-making process. That's also a cross-functional responsibility because just like IT doesn't set business priorities, they don't necessarily know what information people are collecting and where they are storing it.
That's perfect. So let's make things more real for the audience and tie some of them together with examples.
Sure. Let's think about a company that issues laptops to all of their field staff so they can work remotely. Those devices contain valuable information, and we need a policy making it clear for employees to secure their laptops, which includes not leaving it unattended on a coffee shop table or in the back seat of a car. This might seem basic, but we know from the news and our customers, this is a common way for information to get lost or leaked. And some employees will honestly say, oh, I didn't know I couldn't do that. Being clear with policy can be powerful.
There's another approach to take here as well. Even with policies in place, it's a fact of life. People will lose things. They'll come off a long flight and forget their bag in the back of a taxi or turn their head while unloading groceries from the car. Things happen. So the next question is, what further steps can we take to secure the information on that laptop? There are plenty of tools for securing information, and the right ones will depend on the data and what the customer's needs. But the point is that we can mitigate some of the consequences if the first line of defense fails.
Well, that's good news. Do you have another story, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, going back to Tom's earlier point about leadership and helping people understand consequences, there's a real education component about security that ties into our back to basics theme. Many organizations have policies prohibiting the use of external media like USB sticks on company networks. And this can be a serious aggravation for some employees who want to transport files between locations, but an infected USB stick can have devastating impacts. I know someone who works in the manufacturing sector where all of the company's processes are automated and controlled through the internal network. An employee plugged in a USB stick they had used to store some files, and the employee didn't know the stick was infected with malware. The malware subsequently infected the entire network and ultimately shut down the manufacturing processes at the plant. So sometimes it's difficult for staff to understand the bigger picture without training and education. And no doubt there were other things that went wrong, but it started with somebody who didn't appreciate or fully understand the consequences of not following the policy. On the flip side, I have a friend who works in a manufacturing environment, and his IT department regularly advises people against clicking on unknown links in emails, even if they seem benign. And they actually simulate phishing scams by sending an email with a link that promises cute puppy pictures. And if he clicks the link, he gets a warning from IT and a notice that he needs to take the email policy training again.
These examples touch on each step we described earlier. The importance of knowing what matters to the business, identifying who's responsible, and having policies to protect the important data.
Tom, that's another great way of tying this up nicely and neatly. We looked more closely at some of the layers of the security onion that we heard of in our first webinar, and we peeled back a few more. It's clear security is a shared responsibility, which brings me back to our movie inspiration. Are we any closer to identifying who that ogre is?
Well, Corinne, I suspect there's a little ogre in all of us.
You're probably right, Mike. But I'm grateful that everyone kept their inner ogre quiet today. So to wrap up, I'd like to thank you both for your insights. If people have more questions on what they heard of today, where can they go?
I invite everyone to visit the Iosecure website and to view our blog posts on security hygiene, covering the 3 elements we discussed today, as well as some practical tools organizations can consider. To get in contact with us, reach out to our sales team at contact@iosecure.com.
That's excellent. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Mike. I would also like to thank our audience for joining us today. If this is your first time joining us, I invite you to also watch webinar number 1, which was called Back to Basics, a new way of understanding IT security. And of course, I invite you all to join us for webinar number 3 in our series called Navigating the Swamp, How to Build an IT Security Roadmap. In the meantime, be well.